Thanks very much. Well, thanks all of you for keeping to the time. That means we've got a little bit of time for some Q&A and discussion, which is very good. So, Shelly, let's start with you. And I was really interested to hear about your project and what you've been doing globally. So I just wanted to focus in a bit more on this region in terms of what you're already doing here, and how your initiative can make a difference in this particular region. What do you see as the obstacles for women who are maybe at the cutting edge in terms of innovation and startups and so on? What are the difficulties that they are facing in this region? And how much of a difference? I mean, this is a feature of the labour market, obviously, in Greece and Cyprus. The participation rate of women is fairly low. And I guess it's just basic macroeconomics that if we had more women involved in the labour market, that it would, make quite a difference, or could potentially make quite a difference to these economies. So just to hear a little bit more, maybe from you, about how you perceive the particular obstacles in this region and what can be done about it.
Mm-hmm. Thanks for asking. Yeah, so initially, your point about women's participation in general in the economy is quite true. And it does actually then have reverberations in the innovation economy, because so many innovators get their start by identifying issues that they recognized as they were working in other facets, whether it's for large companies or during their student years, whatever. Related to that is also lower participation generally of women in business and tech fields. So that's really. But having said that, for those women who do break through, who just like Eleni Antoniadi, she had 5 degrees. She made up for many other women. That's all I can say. It's not just about where they came from. It's how they're received. And so for women who've got the tech degrees, who've got the knowledge and ability to identify opportunities for innovation, not just for women, but for that would benefit us all. What they're facing is a series of challenges. First of all, they start their businesses to begin with less capital, because their networks are smaller, their access to business people is smaller, and we as an ecosystem have a lot that we could do about it. Governments can do something about it. Certainly, innovation clusters, hubs. We were hearing a lot about innovation hubs in Cyprus and Greece and Israel. This is one way that if we do more outreach and more engagement of women, this would be really helpful. We see that women are participating in these hubs at a lower rate, and when they exit the accelerators, they're getting about 1/3 of the capital that the men who are going through the exact same accelerators. Now, why is this happening? It's happening because, one, there are very few, much fewer, about 13% of investment decision makers in the venture industry are women. And frankly, even though, even with the women decision makers, and they are growing because they're starting their own funds, that's what we're seeing in our consortium. Nevertheless, women are asked different questions than men, and frankly, get about $1 million less per venture on average than men. So there's a whole array. And just to give you a great example of that, in our conversations of mobilizing venture funds, I was connected to the head of a multi-billion-dollar European investment fund. And when he started the call out, he said, "Shelly, you must understand that when women come through our doors, they are treated absolutely equally to the men." So my response was, "That's fantastic. I'm excited to hear that. So how many women-founded companies have you invested in?" Well, they had over 100 companies on their website, which I went through. I couldn't find one. So I thought maybe they're hiding them. Maybe they're on a different website. But I asked him the question. Radio silence. He could not respond. Number 2, I said, well, that's great. Maybe when women come through your doors, they're treated absolutely equally. But have you ever thought about what it takes for a woman to get to and through your doors before she even faces your investment committee? These are all issues. It's network issues and it's access issues are first and foremost. Secondly, it's being prepared for the ask. And thirdly, it's ensuring that, when the capital is available, that they're being asked the same questions, which we know they're not. And the European Union, actually, the European Commission, sorry, and the EIB, European Investment Bank, just published a report in June that details all the many steps of issues that we need to address in order to ensure that we're catalyzing women innovators who can solve some of our great problems and also drive economic growth. So I encourage you to all look at that. It's a comprehensive report. It also gives us some breakdowns in regions and so forth.
Thank you very much, Shelley. Anybody else on the panel, happy to hear your thoughts on Shelley's presentation and what she said as well. I'm sure that's all of interest to you too. So, Michalis, turning to you again, you really emphasised in your opening remarks the importance of regional cooperation, and how that's been really decisive for Cyprus, which does seem to have emerged as this, real hub in the region, and obviously with Greece and Israel and the US dimension as well. It's this really seems to have taken off. Now, do you think that would have happened anyway? Do you think that, obviously it's to do with the hydrocarbons, development and potential and so on in the region, but do you think that the pandemic has really accelerated that trend? Would we have seen, for example, all these memorandums being signed in recent weeks, the establishment or the formalization of the Eastmed Gas Forum as a regional organization? Do you think those things were just, natural occurrence, or have things actually speeded up? And when you look at the prospects for Cyprus, what do you think is more important, the development of those relationships, or some of the measures that the ministers have outlined earlier in terms of the government's national plan to improve the business environment and the other initiatives that have been taken? Obviously, it's not either or, but in the balance of things, what do you think has been most important for Cyprus in recent years and looking forward?
Yeah, well, thank you, Hai. Nothing comes by chance. You have to see what your country needs. And, fortunately enough, or unfortunately, I don't know, we live in a region that is quite turbulent. And we need to keep the position of being a very stable country. As I said in my opening remarks, both politically and economically, that we can support our substance as a country of services. And it's very important for us that we manage to sign not only the recent memorandums that you have seen, but also in the last 2-3 years, we signed MOUs with Egypt, Israel, Jordan, Lebanon, and of course Greece, in order to be able to create this stability in the region. And this is very important for Cyprus. Of course, what is more important, as you said, it's to keep sustainability, as our minister said before. It's very important for us to keep this momentum of growth that we continue to have. And we believe that after the pandemic, whenever that happens, we are going to have the right tools to move our economy forward as we did before. Cypriots are very hardworking people. And of course, we need a stability inside the country so that we can create this liquidity going. But also we need the foreign investment in order to keep the growth. The internal stability and liquidity is not enough to get the growth going up. the last years of 3 to 4% of rate of growth, it was not by chance. We had a lot of foreign direct investment through many tools and decisions of the government, and we took exactly these important factors in order to keep our economy in the right direction. And this allowed us to have the proper cooperation with all these countries of the region, and these MOUs are mainly targeted on exchange of information and exchange of other kind of cooperation as far as investments and entrepreneurship are concerned. So it's very important for us to keep this momentum going.
Thank you very much. So final question for the other two panelists, Mr. Constantine and Mr. Boulougouris. So Mr. Constantine, in your introduction, it was very interesting. You approached it from a kind of broader, geopolitical perspective as well, and how the region fits into this, and obviously certain trends, geopolitical trends, that have been again accelerated as a result of the pandemic, including with regard to supply chains and deglobalization and so on. So, and from Mr. Boulougouris, you're involved in the broader region as well, Eastern Europe. So I wanted to really ask you, how this particular region stands to, benefit from some of these trends, perhaps. So if we're talking about reshoring or nearshoring, do you think that Cyprus and Greece have an advantage maybe over the broader region, Eastern Europe region? It'd be interesting to hear from both of you your perspective on that. And I guess it's also about comparing political stability in the broader Eastern Europe region and in this region, how labour markets, infrastructure, and so on. How well placed do you think Greece and Cyprus are to benefit from some of the geopolitical changes that we're seeing?
Who would you like to go first?
Yeah.
Well, as I said, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Please go on. Yes.
Okay, great. So, as I said in my remarks, granted, Eastern Europe is cheap and competent and will no doubt play a larger role as things shift to closer or shorter supply chains. But as I said before, given the proximity, our proximity and our access to the West Asian markets, to North African and East African markets, and I'm speaking of Cyprus now. Some of these aspects are also true for Greece, but Cyprus and Greece are not identical in terms of the role that they can play in within the region or vis-a-vis Europe. So Cyprus, as I said before, has some advantages in that it is both common law and has a very broad network of not just double tax treaties, but investment treaties as well, which allows for companies operating to avail themselves to the protections of those treaties. So if you're looking to access emerging markets or markets in the region, we make tremendous sense, especially for Western interests, to base their operations out of. There is possibly potential for Cyprus to even be to benefit as a supplier, particularly in sort of pharmaceutical and healthcare. But I would say in that narrow sort of focus, that would be some areas. Beyond that, in the broader or larger geopolitical context, and you have to have a broader geopolitical context when you talk about future growth, whether it's for the region itself or for the country. As I said in my remarks, I think we have tremendous potential to be a very important swing region in the current climate and the climate going forward, at least for the foreseeable future.
Thank you very much. Mr. Boulougouris, what's your view?
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, I would say that both Greece and Cyprus, if we compare them also with Eastern European countries, I think they need to focus on their advantages. Obviously, I don't think that you can expect Greece or Cyprus to become the industrial power hubs that you see, for example, in Romania or the Czech Republic or Poland, building cars for Germans and things like that. I think this is rather unlikely. On the other hand, there are several other advantages that they can focus on, where they are very competitive. And I think so achieving growth through other means is possible, whether it is tourism, it's financial services, it is energy, technology. There are various, I think, pharmaceuticals, various, I think, industries and sectors that they can be competitive in order to grow. So it doesn't mean that because we don't have the advantages of Eastern Europe, we cannot still grow at a decent rate that is above average. And in addition, I would stress as well that they're both Eurozone economies. That is also quite significant and provides another stability factor, in my view at least. So that's another factor to stress. So yes, there are differences, but I think definitely there is ability to grow in the future, as long as the focus remains, market-oriented, to a market-oriented approach, and not to, believing in aspirations that are not feasible, let's say.
Thank you. Well, I'd like to thank all of you very much. We're unfortunately out of time. We're running well over time, actually. And we have one final panel with speakers standing by. But I think it was a very useful panel and provided some regional and broader perspective for the discussions that we had earlier in the day. So thank you very much for your insightful contributions, and thanks for joining the conference today, and particularly thanks to Invest Cyprus as well for your support for this summit. And just to echo what you said at the beginning, Michalis, I hope that we're going to be doing this in person next year in New York.
Absolutely.
And I hope to see all of you there, definitely. Absolutely. For sure. Let's make that happen. So thank you very much again.